Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert alongside the good Father. You know him, you love him. Put your hands together once again. Hey, get out of that seat and on your feet and say a big howdy doody to Father Joe Grimaldi. Friends, at Houghton McInerney Star Lincoln, we treasure your time. Isn't it time for you to experience the Star treatment? If you're in the greater Detroit area and you're looking for a new Lincoln, then Star Lincoln is your only answer. Father Joe Grimaldi and I have our new Lincoln Corsairs from Star Lincoln, but you may be thinking of something a little bigger, like the stunning Lincoln Nautilus, the sleek Lincoln Aviator, or the one-of-a-kind Lincoln Navigator. Shop online with Star Express. Swift, simple, safe. Browse for your new Lincoln online and customize and order your new Lincoln from home. It's that easy. Or drop by our beautiful showroom today and visit with one of our expert sales associates. Whatever you choose, you'll see why we've been selling Lincolns for over 50 years. Houghton McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road and Telegraph in Southfield. Shop online at starlincoln.com, or you can call Star Lincoln at 248-354-4900. I have a quick question for you, sir. And you're going to probably go, are you kidding me? You don't know the answer to this, but let me set it up for you.
I probably don't.
St. Peter's Parish here in Michigan, in Mount Clemens, got a new altar to complement the old altar going back a number of years, going back obviously into the 60s, 50s, if you will. So we've talked a number of times about the old altar with the tabernacle, and the priest would always face, his back was nearly to the back of the parishioners.
Always, yeah.
90% of the time. So they have just now installed, made in Italy, a beautiful new marble top for their new altar. And our Archbishop Vigneron, he, I guess, what would you say?
Anointed it?
He anointed it and said a beautiful mass. And of course, it's emboldened with the keys of St. Peter.
Right.
All right, now we would recognize the keys of St. Peter if we saw them. They're rather simplistic. They look like a couple of keys, just not quite together in a cross, but
right.
Rather they are crossed, but not like a cross. Anyway, my friend Father Joe Grimaldi, what are the keys of St. Peter?
Huh.
I don't remember.
Okay, St. Peter was of the traditional, I hate to use terms, but if we were to look at them today, we would say Peter was very traditional, Paul was very liberal. So these are the terms we would use a lot. Why? Peter made it very strict for people to become Catholic, to the point where they really believed that maybe in order to be a good Catholic, you have to be a good Jew. And so that meant you had to be circumcised. And so this left out a lot of the people who wanted to become Catholics because they didn't want to go through that. That was not their custom. Well, here comes Paul. So Peter and Paul fighting over this, over circumcision, really. Paul says, that's ridiculous. He says, the faith comes from the heart, nothing from the exterior of the flesh. It's from inside. Those who believe should be able to join the Christian faith. So he held the keys to the kingdom very tightly. If it weren't for Paul, though, the church would still be in Jerusalem. It would never leave. But Paul is the one that spread the church through northern Africa in the beginning, and then into Greece and different places that were nearby, the Middle East and so on.
Well, we say nearby, but I mean, back in those days, they were a little off, quite a distance.
They were, but he was able to preach the word in those places, establishing churches in all of those areas. Whereas Peter was basically homebound because he was the leader of all of them. How did he become the leader?
Can I take a guess? Because I was thinking about that while you were speaking.
Yeah.
Is its roots in Peter, can I see it for a minute? And upon this rock I will build my church. Basically, here are the keys.
Yes. Okay.
Am I close?
No, you're more than close.
Okay.
That's very, very good. But there's something further is this, that in those days, they used to have what they call rescripts. And all that was if you are the bishop in the nearby town and you had a question about what to do for the marriage ceremony or whatever, well, you would write to Peter. Why? No one really knew, but it was Peter they would write to. Peter then would respond with a rescript. In other words, it's almost like you get a piece of paper, turn it over, and write an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so with many of the churches deferring to Peter, like the Church of Jerusalem deferring to Peter, well, because James was head of the Church of Jerusalem, if he had questions, he would write to Peter, and Peter would respond. But because so many people deferred to him, as well as because of his vocation coming directly from Christ at that time, but it's a combination of both, because he was recognized. Nobody called him Pope. We call him Pope because he was head of the church, but he was not a Pope in the sense that we know today.
Right.
But they deferred to him for all the answers of the church. And so it was an unwritten Pope, if you want. I mean, he was the one in charge. He was the one who sent out the rescripts, and they did that for years. I mean, many, many years, centuries. These rescripts would come back from Rome, and it would be an answer to questions that people would have.
Give me an example of a rescript today. Could you do that?
Today, well, it would be, let's say, a question that had to do with annulments.
Okay, yeah.
And you as a parish priest, or even the bishop of the diocese, is not sure what to do with a particular case, and he would write up that case and send it to Rome. Rome would send it back. Now, we don't call it rescripts today, but that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a question and an answer. The answer is the rescript, going to the word script, which is the writing, so the question, and then turn the paper over, and you have the answer. That's what it was. So as simple as that. We're talking about...
No, I like that.
2,000 years ago,
yeah,
at least. And so I think Peter, because he was given the keys to the kingdom, because people deferred to him as the leader of the church. They didn't say Pope, but the leader of the church. You wonder where that comes from. Maybe from the Greek church, where they would call them Papa, who was the father of the church, as it were. But I don't know where the word Pope comes from.
Oh, I always assumed it was Viva la Papa. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like Papa.
In Latin we would say Papa, but Pope in English... It's an English name, too, I think. Alexander Pope, the writer.
Yeah.
It's an English name. But anyway, that's trivia.
Well, it's somebody right now is going to eventually pull over and get the answer for us. But
that's right.
We continue. So Peter was, and upon this rock I will build my church.
Right.
And Paul is part and parcel of this whole new journey that's going forward, that is establishing and growing the Catholic Church. So Paul and Peter don't agree on much, right?
Well,
I know that they had to agree on the essentials, but it's funny when you look back on the names now that we just mentioned. So many of the friends that I had just growing up in high school and grade school, just so many of them were named after apostles. You know what I mean? There was probably 3 or 4 families I can think of right now that had boys with Peter and Paul
and James.
Yeah.
Well, but Peter and Paul are always booked together. Okay.
Yeah, they are.
I hate to say that, but many of the churches are called Saints Peter and Paul.
That's right.
There is a special feast day that's been forever in the church, well, hundreds of years, let me put it this way, and that's on the 29th of June, and that's the Feast of Saints Peter and Paul. And that's the day when the Pope gives out the pallia, what the Pope and archbishops wear. It's a stole, but a special kind, and that's given to all of the new archbishops. But they do it on that feast.
So how did those keys, is that an interpretation that somebody came up with, hundreds of years later. I mean, I'm just trying to, because now that I think about those keys you see, I don't think you notice them as often, but when you do, then it's like whenever you buy a new car, you had never noticed, that brand of car until you got it. When you see one coming at you, it's like, oh, that's my car.
Yeah,
or you park in the parking lot.
You're
you go,
right.
Oh, that's my car. Well, it turns out that in talking about the keys of St. Peter now, there it is, there they are. And so...
But scripturally, if I'm saying that correctly, they were not keys as such, okay? He gave him the authority of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have to look at the clever writers and thinkers at the same time. What does that mean, give him the authority? Well, he's got the keys of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was, basically. Whether they were real keys or not, I have no idea. And I don't think too many people do. I could almost see theologians, well, it was this, and the other, no, it was that. But you could see them arguing of how that came about and when it came about, because we don't know.
Yeah. The football season is just starting, okay? And when you get 5 or 6 referees, or I should say one referee and a bundle of other refs, nobody can get anything straight anymore. If we can't get football straight here in 2022, how can anybody explain, I'm going off here, the keys to St. Peter? The keys to St. Peter look like 2 keys, old-fashioned keys.
The artist rendition.
It's so simple, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's simple and it's perfect, and it just sort of says, it's perfect to be in the very front of this beautiful altar that just was made and shipped over here. And it's just something that I saw that I thought I would ask you about, and by golly, by gosh, you knew all about it. So when Peter and...
I don't think so, but go ahead.
Did Peter and Paul physically, were they together a lot or not? I know that they were obviously at a certain time early on, but did they, in terms of territory, area, geography, logistics?
They have different jobs. If you look at it this way, Peter was stationary. He was the one who answered questions, as it were. He was the one who was stable. He was the one who would be the T with the capital T, tradition with the capital T. For him, this is tradition, and this is what we have. Paul was never around, I don't think. Paul was always traveling somewhere, and he was spreading the word as much as possible. However, it did happen that the Ecumenical Council took up the circumcision eventually, but in the beginning it was simply Paul and Peter, because Peter wanted to make it, you really have to be a good Jew before you could become a good Christian. So, I mean, they're not talking Catholic, but Christian. And Paul says, no, you don't. No, you don't need to be physically a certain way. In order to become a good Christian, you have to have what they call a conversion of heart. That you look at what your faults and foibles are and turn them into good for the world. And you look at the heart, you don't look at physical aspects of the body. So that's where Peter would be very much traditional. Oh, no, look at this. Most of the converts in the beginning were Jewish, see?
Mm-hmm.
So it just was natural in a way. Why not? You have to be a Jew first. Then you could become a Christian. Paul says, forget it.
I like that. I mean, I think that's how things get done. I think
I'm simplifying, sorry.
No, but that's, when you think about, big business corporations, you think about any workplace, that's how things get done, based on a really good disagreement and ultimately a solution to that disagreement.
They did reconcile, though, we're told, and I don't know what the moment was.
I got to be honest with you. I know this is sort of a tee-hee-hee moment for the guys when we were younger.
Sure.
The circumcision, okay?
Oh, okay.
The circumcision, it's like you do and you don't want to think about it. And to this day, I still don't quite understand how we ever really got there. But I never really got why it was so important in the church. You know, this whole thing, like, here we go, Peter and Paul disagreeing about something that was a procedure done to a male. And I know that it was a Jewish tradition.
More than a tradition, though.
All right, so go ahead.
No, all I was going to say, it's a dedication of that child to God. And one of the ways is the sacrifice of losing the foreskin of the penis, if you want.
Yeah, well, that's...
But basically, it's more than a tradition because it really makes you a Jew. I know it sounds awfully simple, but to many people, and to them, I think, that that's part of being a Jew. Even today, one of the things that distinguishes them from others is usually the others are not circumcised. Although, if you go to the hospitals, very often after birth they do circumcisions. So it's not as unheard of even among the non-Jews.
Right, and on occasion, that is, if people find out after the fact, they can be very, very, very upset by that.
Yeah.
In other words, it's like, how dare you take the liberty with my child to do that? And we were preferring not to, and I don't want to get too much into the circumcision, but it does play a major, or did, or I don't know so much.
Religious.
Yeah. And I know it's still very important to our brothers and sisters in the Jewish faith, correct?
Right, correct. Yeah.
I mean, that is not anything that is going to possibly be going away.
It's something like our baptism, basically.
Yeah. It is a carryover. We know that.
Yeah.
So Peter and Paul were loggerheading over that just a little bit.
Right.
And anything else? Both were decent writers, prolific writers, different styles, different approaches.
If you want to get heavy about writing, it would have to be Paul.
Okay.
Peter was more the administrator. He was the head administrator of the whole thing, whereas Paul would be the one that wrote. I mean, if you look at his writings to the Romans, for example, that contains almost everything that we believe in as a Catholic church. And that was written by Paul, and it goes on and on and on. And then, in order to get recognition, very often, in those days, what they would do is sign Paul's name, so that this way it gave it credibility, you know.
They would do what? I'm sorry?
Somebody would sign Paul's name.
Oh, hey.
So some of these scriptures that have come across through the years, you know, with the Biblicum, where they study that, they see, wow, this doesn't sound like Paul's style. It was written in his name, but, you know, this type of thing.
Yeah.
So basically, Paul would be considered the writer, the missionary, the one who spread the faith. And then Peter would be, he held on to the keys. In other words, he was the administrator.
Right.
He was the president, if you want. Maybe that's what we would call him today. I don't know.
Sure. So Paul was the traveler then. He was traveling quite a bit.
Yeah, he traveled.
And so Peter was rather static. He was like, sit down, and I'm not going anywhere. Bring it to me. Let me see.
I'll answer questions.
I'll answer questions. Now, I know I'm going deep on this, but I'm just curious because I'm visualizing them right now as I speak of them, how I would see them, all right? And I would see Peter as being one that would like to be rather dressed out, you know. He would want things to look very, very, you know, authentic and, you know, I'm the one in charge. In other words, when you went in to see him, the room would naturally just light up. Like, there he is, St. Peter. Whereas Paul would be more of a rugged fella who's a little road weary and, you know, ridden hard and put away wet. So that's...
I have to make a disclaimer. I'm no expert. Okay?
No, I know. I mean, none of us really can be.
When you look at Peter and you look at Paul, they were super fishermen and ready to make many faults.
There you go. Now you know part of the story of the keys of St. Peter. And if you see them, we highly recommend that you go, hey, I heard about the keys of St. Peter.
And it's our version, by the way.
The Father Joe Grimaldi podcast.
It's our version.
Our version of it. Do you have a prayer for us today?
we always have a little prayer, but in any case, I want to take this opportunity to, again, we are with or without the pandemic. No one really knows. Lord, teach us to trust, to have faith in you as we try to navigate in this new normal, whatever it is. We would love to think that we could be at peace, but only if we truly trust you. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. God bless you now. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.